Word. I'll pass it over to you. Welcome, Grayson.
Thank you so much. I'm going to see if I can kick off this presentation here. So my name is Grayson Bass. Thank you for that lovely and generous intro, Hannah. Welcome, everybody. I'm happy to share what I've learned. I would like to start with a few things here in Canada. It's something that's very important, but I think it's important for all peoples and all places, is to acknowledge that the land that we're on. And here in the region of Waterloo, the Waterloo region where I manage the lab, it's made up of 7 different communities, 3 cities and 4 rural townships. It's all along the Grand River watershed. And that actually used to be how we used to govern, was along watersheds. And I think it's important to understand that as settlers here, we have a duty to both acknowledge that, and I will always say I don't believe in the idea of decolonization. I believe in the idea of re-indigenization, because I think that brings us back to our natural state of humanity. So that would be at least a little bit of where I would like to start today. I'd also like to start by saying we're all equal in our infinite levels of ignorance. It just so happens that today I'm here hopefully sharing the stories of my experience to help level up humanity so that we're all a little less ignorant. And that's kind of how I look at and view what I do in this community, is how do we level up? Because I run a government innovation lab, but the mission is to make this the best community for children and youth. And in order to do that, that means we have to change from where we are today to where we're going to be in the future. So in that, so I'll say I really run a change management office. But when we think about it, I really run a youth engagement lab, or a community engagement lab, because that's the ultimate way that we look at things, is trying to create this sense of belonging. And I think that this is a really powerful concept. I've worked on innovation projects all around the world, and I can say with all certainty, this is the easiest and most rewarding innovation project I have ever worked on when it comes to ideation, partnerships, collaboration. And it's because we are listening and leading and co-creating with youth in our community. And if there is a takeaway for all of you, if you're trying to build a government innovation lab or a community-based lab or solve community and social challenges, engage youth, engage children. The trick, and I think what is part of what we've done, the skill to develop, is learning how to listen, because children and youth will see things that we miss, but they do so in a way that is years and sometimes decades ahead. And I think that this is really important, given the challenges that we will bequeath them this century and what world they will grow up in. I always like to start kind of like with this idea of imagining what the future looks like. And if you've been reading this, think about what that would mean for your own community. Imagine what this would look like when you can harness the power of not just one lab in your community, but 100 different labs, because you're empowering classrooms, you're empowering community centers, you're empowering youth groups to get together and actually transform that community. And today, if you've read the description, we're going to talk about a couple things. I'm going to spend some time to really talk about the why we do this. I want to talk about and define what innovation is, because I think Voltaire would say, I'll argue with you about anything, but first define your terms. I want to share with you what we've accomplished, and then I want to share an invitation to fail, both for yourselves and with your teams and with us. And then I want to be able to answer some questions that I hope can help, or that are inspired by the conversation. I really like this quote from Roosevelt. You can hear that I am in Canada. I do run a Canadian lab, but I'm afflicted with a Southern accent. I grew up in West Texas, and I didn't realize how ignorant I sounded until George W. Bush started running for office. And, he makes up words, and I thought that was normal growing up. So if I make up a word or it sounds strange, then feel free to laugh. As far as to prepare you for what you're about to get. I like to teach, so I am a professor at universities before, which means I can talk literally from now until the sun sets. But it also means that I've been told listening to me is like drinking from the fire hose. So there's going to be a lot that will come after you, but feel free to ask questions. That goes back to like we are all ignorant. If you have a question, like ignorance is a choice today. Feel free to ask. We can have nice things, but there was this recent academic article that said government bureaucrats are really good at doing the wrong thing. And it's not because of ineptitude. It's not because of malintent. It's because we have not quite evolved. And I think that that really is what a tool for an innovation lab is it is the point where a community can evolve. If you think about all the policies that we have, particularly at a municipal level, sanitation, like how we're picking up the trash, sewage, how we're getting rid of the waste in the water, how we're getting basic necessities for human life, housing programs, health programs, these are all existence. These are all foundational for survival. And that makes sense. Like we should have the basics of necessity. But when we start thinking that way, we have boxed ourselves into a limited economy thinking. And what we've done is we've built in generational debt because we start to enshrine the need to survive versus what we have in our modern society, which is the ability for every person to thrive. And that really is the transformation that when we think about building for the future, when we think about creating value for our communities, that's really where we have an exponential growth and exponential impact as public servants. This comes from a friend of mine who used to work at Microsoft, and he said, Grayson, you know how much it costs to fix a bug at a developer's desk? I said, I don't know. You can probably guess it's 20 bucks. He says, you know what that same bug is once it gets into production? And I said, I don't know. He's like, it's $10,000. And he says, you know what it costs when we release something and the bug is in the wild? He goes, it's a minimum $1 million fix. And we are stuck addressing $1 million problems. And that is a big problem. That's a drain on resources, particularly in an inflationary period. We are unable to go upstream and solve those problems so that we're stuck providing multi-million-dollar housing solutions, or as opposed to what could we do upstream to limit the unhoused or to address it in a more social and compassionate way? How are we addressing people who are now stealing in the community because they don't have fundamental needs to eat and feed their families when 6 months ago they could have qualified for a food program, and even before that we could have built in a way that that individual could thrive? We're asking the wrong questions. And that really is the paradox of government innovation, which is it's government's job to keep the wheels on the bus and the train on the track, and it's innovation's job to strip it off, put wings on it, and send it to Mars. And these kind of polarizing needs play out in society as, is government, have we earned the right to continue managing a community? Because when you lose that right, that's when the torches and pitchforks come out. That's when the revolution comes, and revolutions are messy. We do not want that. So it's my job, and if you're running a community innovation lab, to sort of midwife or lead the evolution. And the best way that we can do that, and the fastest way, is by engaging children and youth and by just listening and focusing on what are those basic human needs, but how do we express and empower humans not to survive, but to thrive. And that changes our decision logic and what we do. So I'm going to stop real quick from that kind of overarching picture and just define what is innovation, because this is really important. My colleague who manages half the lab, which we call the play lead in the lab, so you can imagine that's with the youth engagement side. he made this and simplified what I'm about to show you. So that's why I'm showing this first. This is a lot more playful. This is how we teach adult allies. This is how we teach youth. And frankly, if we design for children and youth, then we've designed for everyone. But this is our definition of innovation: something you're really good at, plus something you've never done or never thought about, and it creates value. When we hear people talk about, well, there's business innovation, research innovation, technology innovation, I want to start crying because it makes it so difficult. People say that there's different ways to do that. There is not. What value is what you're trying to achieve. And here in government, we're trying to achieve social and community value. We're trying to ensure that civilization, society continues, but not only continues, that has the conditions to thrive. Because as managers, and what every business school in the world will tell you, it's not our jobs to be successful, it's our jobs to create the conditions for success. And I want you to hold that thought about conditions for success, because that's really important with actually how we hire at the lab. Once we understand, like, this is the definition of innovation, you can see there's nothing about technology here. It's expertise, which everybody has a superpower. It's experience, where you're doing that, how you're finding new things and combining them in your brain. And that's what creates value. And I think if you use this definition, then we understand that innovation then happens on a spectrum. So things like implementing a new ERP or accounting system, it doesn't sound very innovative, but it's on the innovation spectrum. It's a portion of an optimization function. And I think it's important to understand and acknowledge that any type of value creation that requires you to do something different and to use your expertise is what innovation is. And understanding that then helps us understand how to build an innovation portfolio, how we accelerate things through a pipeline, and to actually look at what we're doing. Because if we are focused on optimization, sustaining innovation, that left side of that spectrum, we are ensuring failure. We are ensuring societal failure. Every company that is focused on prioritizing efficiencies and effectiveness in an optimization way, what ends up happening is you reduce your capacity to be flexible, which means you can't respond or adapt to change. And the logical decision is to build more houses, when the real solution is something that we address it upstream that costs a fraction of the cost. And understanding that innovation happens along this spectrum really makes a difference. So I wanted to give, here's kind of a model. Here's it in a little bit different language, using what my colleagues came up with was like cake. Optimization is like making a cake and then making the recipe so you can make it the same every time. So you're making vanilla cake. It's the world's best vanilla cake. You've got it. You can crank that out. You're like the 3-star Michelin chef of vanilla cakes. That's an optimization function. How do we then source supplies so that we can make more profit or do it faster? Sustaining innovation then is like, how do we then say, well, we're really good at this. Maybe we can chop up some strawberries or some freeze-dried strawberries. And we have a strawberry cake. Maybe we make chocolate cake. We're introducing new flavors, and all of a sudden, it could potentially lead to breakthrough in that we're having all sorts of new things. But really, we're doing the same thing. We're just adding a few different ingredients, which then leads to breakthrough, which is like, wow, we could make pocket cakes and cakes that go into vending machines, because all of a sudden we can make them smaller into cupcakes, and that changes things. And kind of the example we use is this idea of disruption then becomes cake pops. It's something completely random and new. It's another type of candy, like a lollipop, and we do something different. The example that I use is this. Imagine that we're making these red cups in a factory. And an accountant realizes, or an engineer goes, if we shave 1 millimeter off the bottom, it'll still stand and we'll make $1 million extra profit a year because we're saving money. That's fantastic. If we use that same machine, same way, and we just add blue dye instead of red, all of a sudden we have a new product. We've got blue cups. It's amazing. We are expanding our market. All of a sudden we may realize we can have the entire rainbow color of cups. And being Pride Month, we're going to have a bonanza of cup sales. It'll be fantastic. But then as we start to think, maybe someone will have a new experience. Maybe one of us is running in a marathon and we're going to reach for our beautiful plastic cups and someone in front of us knocks over and like the last mile is horrible because we're dehydrated. Maybe some of us are exercising, we're doing yoga and lifting weights, we knock over, everyone in the gym is mad at us. We come back to the office, we share this story. Eventually we realize, hey, what if we like made a lid and it could screw on and off, and we've just invented the plastic bottle, and now all of a sudden it's a breakthrough because we've expanded our market. Now we're not just selling empty cups that hold things, we're selling a completed product that now opens the door to now we're selling to airlines and hotels and tour buses. It's in vending machines. That is what breakthrough is. And that is the end of our innovation journey because we're asking the same question. We've gotten to the $10,000 problem. Disruption is a different approach. And this is why we can build a world-class lab quickly, because we're willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable. We're willing to look at and ask a new question, which would be, why are all these people drinking water? And all of a sudden, maybe we'll figure out that for this example, there's a magic pill or magic cake pops appear. And all of a sudden that changes our daily need. All of a sudden, the economics of water are completely different. How we share, how we care change. It changes a fundamental behavior of humans. And in one generation, we went from a plastics company polluting the world to a pharmaceutical company providing hydration and the basic needs for all of humanity in a tiny, tiny pill. That's an extreme example, but you can see that this is from a practical level. This is kind of what it looks like. You have basic wheelchairs where it requires someone to push. You then added a few pieces that allowed an individual to mobilize themselves. Technology then equipped someone, the chair then moved itself. And a disruptive solution is all of a sudden, we're not thinking, how do we move someone who can't move through external means, but all of a sudden, we're enabling someone to regain the use of their body. All innovation starts someplace over here, whether that's disruption or breakthrough sustaining, and it always, always goes as fast as it can to optimization. And optimization then leads to a different skill tree until you have something where somebody asks a better question. That also requires you to measure it differently. And this is where a lot of amazing innovative ideas in government fail, because someone creates a breakthrough or a disruptive innovation that has the power to transform the community, but there is no clear way to measure it. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't save money in the same way that we expect because it takes a lot of money. You can think of an example of electrifying your fleet of transportation vehicles. We know long-term it'll save money. We know it is better for the environment. We know people prefer and enjoy riding on it. We don't do it because the logic is, well, we have this built cost of infrastructure and we don't want to get rid of it. And we limit a chance for breakthrough. We limit our chance for having this social impact and improving society because we've reduced lead and pollution levels, so we're going to have lower cost for healthcare. We've reduced maybe sounds of loud engines, so we have more peaceful settings so that birds can come back, the environment improves. We don't calculate all of the benefits effectively because we're fixed in saying this is what it is. And forget about anything that then would be this disruptive. We're doing the right thing by trying to use and leverage existing tools and resources and infrastructures in order, because we know we have to do more with less, but all we're doing is running towards an inevitable collapse. This is where an innovation lab has the ability to completely change how communities work. So how do you do that? And that really comes down to like, what are the fundamentals of running a good innovation lab? And I will say this, if this is the one thing you take away today, if it's the only thing that you want to take away today, please take away this. Not toilet paper, but we ask for one question when people come to the lab, which is, what is compassion? I want someone to define it. I want to understand how they understand what it means. That's the Voltaire piece. And the second part of that one question, and the one that really defines it, which is how do you teach compassion? And there's a reason for that. It's not because we're a bunch of hippies. Uh, Compassion and innovation in the brain are the same. This is one of the most exciting things for me that I've learned in the past decade, which is MIT did some research. They put fMRI caps on people and they were looking for the eureka moment. And I think we can say that's a pretty good proxy for innovation. That's kind of new novelty. You're combining, you're using your superpower, like Archimedes in the bath when he displaced water and Eureka happened. And you have a new experience and you get innovation. You've created value. He created a new way to measure. And what we find is that the highest frequency brain wave state, the gamma wave state, like the Incredible Hulk, he gets gamma radiation, but more awesome, is you literally have a light bulb moment and a photon is released, and you are now in the innovation mindset. You are in a gamma wave state. And that is awesome for someone whose profession is around innovation, because if we can elicit that state, then we know we can change it. But this is what's more awesome. A very respected researcher in Germany at the Max Planck Institute and was focused, a researcher for neuroscience, was watching monks meditate, looking specifically for like how meditation improves like, health and cognition, things like this. And like all good innovators, one of the monks started doing something weird under the MRI machine. And the woman, Dr. Singer, was looking and go, whoa, whoa, what are you doing? The monk's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And she's like, no, no, keep doing it, keep doing it. What she found is profound, is that this monk was doing a meditation on compassion. And compassion had the same response as what innovation is, which you enter into a gamma wave state. You're the highest frequency wave state of the brain, where we can say things that appear miraculous, where healing, your most effective state is in this gamma wave frequency. And this is incredible. And I want to clarify something. Compassion is an infinite sustainable resource for the brain, and it is different from empathy. I go crazy when I hear us encourage learning empathy in our organizations or learning empathy in schools, because empathy leads to burnout. We are teaching people and encouraging burnout. Again, we're doing the right thing, but we're doing the wrong thing with right intentions. Empathy and pity run on the same rails of the brain. And that's important to note, because pity is the emotion that is most commonly cited by people who participate in forms of mass violence and genocide and horrible acts towards other human peoples. They will say they felt pity for the first person that they harmed. Pity and empathy are closely related. Compassion runs on a different rail, and that is something that is profound for what you are doing. You can think of compassion as selfless. Empathy is selfish. You're trying to relieve someone else's pain because it makes you uncomfortable. If you want to know who the most empathetic president in the United States, at least in the last 100 years, it's Donald Trump. We could probably all argue, no matter how you vote, compassion looks differently. That's number one. If you have this in your lab, you can accomplish anything, because it creates a ethos, it creates a team, it creates a group of people that are capable of solving problems. I would rather have 10 mediocre but compassionate individuals than 10 selfish outperformers, because I guarantee the compassionate group will outperform. And that's what's amazing with children and youth. That age group, youth in particular, from, let's say 13, 14, 15 to their to mid 20s, are naturally innovative. They're naturally compassionate. They care. They want to know. And of course, younger children, so much more so. In the lab, we use a near peer system. We have university co-op students work with high school with junior high or upper middle school. with elementary, and then down on to like smaller children, with the goal of trying to increase this sense of belonging. Belonging is the number one driver that what we find that improves well-being. You'll hear companies nowadays, they're talking about belonging. I wish I was smart enough to take claim for this, but it was an organization here in Waterloo region called the Children Youth Planning Table, who've been working for like 20 years. And collectively, this group came together and said, belonging is the most important thing. We need to focus on this. We measure this. We measure this now through a metric that we've developed called personal involvement in community, which is not you, like your parents pushing you to do something in the community, but you as an individual wanting to do something. And it's based on qualitative, like how is it something that you would recommend to others? Do you feel good about it? Would you do it again? Quantitative, like metrics, which are frequency and time. How often are you doing it? And what's the volume, the time that you're spending on that? And when you understand that you're engaging children and youth, you're building for everyone. When the lab started, people said, well, what's the, like, how do you know you're going to be successful? And my boss, he also asked, well, how do I know you're going to be working? I said, well, I can answer the second question first. Well, you're going to get a complaint once a week that someone's going to complain about me. And that's how you're not going to know I'm working. He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, innovation makes people uncomfortable. It requires them to change. People don't like that, especially entrenched systems. So if you're getting a complaint, then no, I'm doing my job. He goes, well, please just make it like once a quarter. I said, I can't. I'm here to work. I want to do something good. And I can tell you that's probably down to once every 2 weeks or once a month. So I could probably do better. But as far as we both think I could do better, him less and me more. The next piece around that, by driving belonging, how, what do we think the vision is? I say this, and I think that this is true for every community. Imagine a 3-year-old walking out their front door by themselves and going anywhere in their community. Here in the Waterloo region, it's 1,500 square kilometers, to go for swim lessons, to go play with friends, to go to school, to go anywhere that they see fit, and they're able to hop on some form of public transportation, ideally something that is green and maybe autonomous. And along the way, there are people that are paid to help that child and other people navigate. But there are also the community at large is invested in that child getting to where they're going and then making home safe for dinner. What kind of community do you think that would be? I can tell you, that is a community that works for everyone. It works for a senior citizen. It works for someone with a disability. It works for someone who doesn't speak the language. It works for someone who has just arrived in your community. That is a community that works for everyone. It's not the best community for children and youth. It's the best community for everyone. And I think that that is a higher calling for public service. And if you build for children and youth as a primary stakeholder, you can achieve that. If you listen to them, because they will tell us problems that we miss. Giuliani, before he became Giuliani, we all know and love today, had a policy in New York: if there's a broken window, fix it. If the subway has graffiti, clean it off. And that reduced crime. Think of children in the same way with less hair dye, where they are able to go out and see things in the community that we miss. We just need to learn to listen. And once we can hear them, we can start to co-create community with them. The other thing is to hack procurement. It took me 9 months to unlock my budget, to figure out how to use procurement as a tool for innovation. You'll hear this a lot, like in advanced circles. I know I've been saying it for a long time before even this job. Procurement is an amazing source for innovation. Not only can you structure it in a way that you are empowering people to solve problems differently, but at least here at the lab, innovation is about velocity. In procurement, if you get stuck in multiple bid processes, that means you're building too big. In your organization, everyone has procurement rules. Follow those rules. But do it in a different way. because you need to be able to build small pilots. And if you cannot do it within the bounds of single source, no bid procurement, I would say either one of two things are true. One, you do not know what you're doing. It is too big. And you should walk away and find a way to prove what you want to do before you actually build it. Or two, you have built something awesome, ready to scale, and it should go through the procurement process because now you're trying to scale it efficiently. This is really important, and this is why lots of organizations and lots of labs fail, is that they end up building the wrong thing because they can get away with it. To kind of go back to like what that looks like and what we say, I thought that it was kind of a good way to talk about making progress versus showing progress. Um, During that first 9 months, as I was like setting the stage for what we would build and kind of going out and looking for people and designing pilots and figuring out how to procure, um, the lab itself basically went dark, and people were saying like, well, what's happening? People were saying like, there's nothing going on. They hired this guy, nothing's happening. But we're moving forward because I talked to several hundred people in the community to actually understand what needed to be built. Where were the gaps that the lab could support and provide service that would actually improve society? I have a mandate of big data and children and youth. And big data is everything everywhere. Children and youth we define as prenatal up to and through university, kind of into your first job. That basically means I'm the lab that can do anything. So that's a problem we have to figure out to scope what it is. And effectively, we build data tools that either support the child and youth serving ecosystem, which effectively, until I was telling a joke until I realized it wasn't a joke, where some of these nonprofit organizations upgraded to Excel during COVID because they were on the pen and paper system. And then how do we engage and empower children and youth using some both youth engagement tools, give them opportunity, and then how do we use technology to increase accessibility for them? All of that, if you can think of it as kind of like an iceberg in some ways. I inherited this grand vision of a smart cities challenge that the federal government here in Canada put on. Spoiler alert, we didn't win, but that was okay. But that was kind of the two insights from this community, is that we could all work together. So we built a trust network, focused it on children and youth, and built around the idea of increasing belonging. I wish everyone would steal this. I wish everyone around the world would focus on belonging in children and youth, because we would have a better world. When we put children and the youth at the center of communities, we make better decisions. When we focus on belonging, this is not inclusion. Inclusion means we kind of make some people uncomfortable by other people showing up. Belonging is different. Belonging means that you have the ability to show up who you are as you are, wherever you want to be. I told you that that aspect of thriving was important, and those questions about compassion that we asked, the best one that I've got, and we built our first scale program, which is called the Nurture Program, was built because I asked a young woman, how you teach compassion, and she said, I teach people how to compost. I said, what? She goes, yeah, I would teach people how to compost. My grandmother taught me. And if you think about it, compost is a brilliant thing because you're creating an environment for things you can't see that are so tiny, in order that they transform and grow and thrive. And by doing so, they transform the environment around them, that then has exponential benefit as it is then spread out and shared. I thought that's a good answer. So now that's our first scale ready program. It was designed by youth to educate and bring land awareness. We had a 5-year plan that I presented, and we have done that in effectively 2.5 years. We've been recognized as a top government innovation lab through the World Government Summit. It's like the World Economic Forum, or like Davos, or the Oscars for government. We have products that are being adopted both by the private sector as well as multilateral organizations and other governments. We have a framework for engaging youth that is now spreading across the community. And now we're in an exercise of like, how do we build this again? Because we need to ask better questions. Um, I always tell folks it was my job to take the lab from 0 to 1. It was me all by myself, basically for 1 year as I was doing this. And then we hired the data and knowledge lead who runs all of our digital tools and the play lead in March and April. So my job was to take the lab from 0 to 1. Collectively, it was our job to take it from 1 to 10. And now we're on the path to like 10 to 100. And that you can imagine our impact is scaling with that. We have a model for change, which is how do we engage youth and bring them into kind of an innovation space so that we can kind of resource and profile. We're able to manage our pipeline to engage with youth. There's a model called Hart's Ladder, HART, of youth engagement, which basically the bottom three you don't want to be on. And if you can, and there's appropriate levels for some of the middle layers, but when you get to the top, really it is youth initiated. Adults and youth are sharing power. At the top, it's sharing power with children and youth. And I think that if we could do that around the world to make room for children and youth, we would solve all of our problems. Because I can tell you that's one thing that has been a surprise to me is how fast change is possible when you work with and partner with youth. This is not tokenism. This is not bringing them along as decoration. This is really listening to them and working with them. And look, if you're a parent, at home, that is really hard to do. So at least out in the community, like we always like are like, man, we're like hypocrites. We're like doing this and educating people in the community. And of course, we're like having to get support to do it in our own houses. It's not easy. It's not, but everyone can do this. These are some of the projects that we have. You can look at our website. It's swirl, SWRIL.ca. I always say we're the most illiterate lab in the world. You can see I'm afflicted with the Texas accent. I'm also have some dyslexia. Of our team, we only have one person who is, and thankfully that's our comms person, who does not have a learning disability or neurodivergent, and whose first language was English and also speaks French, which is important here in Canada. The rest of us, it's either we immigrated here or we have some neurodivergent. So you can imagine our emails back and forth and like text chats look very strange. And I think that's good because we're leveraging everyone's capability. In our lab, we can host a wide range of neurodivergent students. Everyone belongs here. And these are some of the actually outputs that we can see. You can look on our website. You can see, I guess you can YouTube like GIMI innovation, GIMI impact, and you'll see a video. You'll see videos on our website. You want to see progress. This is what it looks like. It looks like a community and transformation. It looks like where people know if you want to try something new, if you want to get something done, if you want to engage youth, here's the place to go. If you're building a world-class government innovation lab, people shouldn't start to say, yeah, I know about that. I want to go. And I can tell you, we still have a long way to go. We are not perfect. There is a lot more that we can do. There is a lot more that we can do to transform, but that's what our next 5 years is going to be. How do we take this foundation that we've built and then really do something, not just in our community, not just mobilizing all the youth in our community, but how do we do that beyond? How do we scale this model to 10, 20, 100 cities around the world to do something amazing, to address these challenges that we have and to solve them? Municipalities have outsized impact on everything going forward. We'll see multilateral organizations fail. We'll see national governments fail. A lot of it due to climate. But municipalities have the ability to change. They have the ability to directly impact billions of people. And you can do it. Here are 3 rules. This is from an economist named Ronald Coase. He came up with a model about why firms grow that I've extended to why innovations and ideas spread. And these are the 3 effective rules. If you look at these, and map this to our innovation spectrum, it looks something like this. That breakthrough disruption is the bottle or the pill. You're doing something kind of different. It's the cupcakes or the cake pop. That expertise and efficiency is really about making cups faster, better, cheaper, or making different types of cakes. They're both important. Like, don't get me wrong, government should always improve efficiency and effectiveness. It should always leverage the ability to reduce the cost. That is a foundational aspect of government. It just cannot be the only one. And going forward, it cannot be. It cannot be going forward. So what is an innovation lab? Now that we've kind of like talked about that, well, job number one, you got to understand what innovation is. If you do not, you are going to fail. Understand, innovation is not about technology. It's not about shiny things. Like if I could think of like the three sins of innovation, it is overpromise, underdeliver, building stuff that's shiny for no reason than just because it's shiny, like for tech's sake. And the third one is not having leadership support. I am so blessed in my lab that I have an amazing reporting line to the top of our government, both politically and bureaucratically, that have provide air cover for innovation, that allows my reporting line to give me cover so that I can explore, experiment, and pilot new things. And I would say that a lab's job is really not to scale anything, it's to advise on scale. Exploring is just desk research. Like these are really like trying to figure out, should we even do it? Experiment comes down to like, I always say like, we should do $20 experiments. If it costs more than $20 and we cheat on that, like by amortizing things sometimes, then we don't know enough. And that should then take us into a pilot. We can quantify each of these steps and how much it costs, how much time, how much resources it costs. We did not do that from day one. But that is always the goal for a lab, to be able to then share that. And effectively to get from explore to like something that we have proven and ready to scale, at least in our lab in this community, we're running at about 60 or $70,000 Canadian. So like $8 US. If we think about like the focus, it really should be on evolution. So there's this concept called the innovation gap. It's basically when companies fail because they overinvest in optimization. When governments fail, that's revolution. So how do we then focus on asking better questions and engaging change in our community? The next piece, an innovation lab should be moving fast. Plan faster than your government. That is the only way to do it, because otherwise you get stuck in a bureaucratic nightmare. And fail fast. Like we should be able to pull the plug quickly. And in order to do that, that empowers us to learn quickly. And the last one is, a good lab is going to teach others. Anyone who wants to come learn from what we do, how we do it, especially with how to engage and work with youth, we do that. We do it as a pro bono service, and we also do it as a consultative service. Here is something that is like kind of, I see as a quick checklist for you if you're building a lab. The first two, I think, are almost always questionable. I think most of these are not present in most labs that I've been to around the world. There are a few exceptions in government, to be clear, and I hope either you're one of them or you know one of them. But I would say to understand kind of this list from like what are foundational aspects to actually have a lab. If you don't have these things, it doesn't make much sense to even start, versus what are like tactical ways to go about it. And that can change depending on what community that you're in. I'm going to kind of wrap up so we can have some questions, but I just want to say like this is the knowledge pyramid. We add that layer of transformation at the bottom. It's upside down, so I guess it's not a pyramid, it's more of a funnel. But this is kind of how we understand everything that we do and how we kind of move things through that innovation spectrum, through our innovation portfolio. And we've got different aspects happening at different parts of this pipeline, with the ultimate goal that we are increasing belonging and transformation. That increases our ability to thrive. That increases our ability to address problems. And what happens is that when we make youth partner, all of a sudden, we increase our capitalization of resources. We have more humans able to collectively work together. That builds a community of resilience. it builds a community that's able to adapt. There's some research out of Japan where they looked at communities that recovered after a natural disaster. And the surprise was that it wasn't the ones that were most economically advanced. It was the ones where people knew their neighbors, because those communities, people were invested in knocking on the door to make sure that their neighbor was safe and to help them. That's a community of belonging. And we get tangible benefit. We are more resilient. We recover faster. And going forward, we have to do that. We take a story, art, and design first approach at the lab. This is a new way, that people have, I don't know, when I was growing up, we learned Bloom's taxonomy for learning. And, this is a much more simplification. And I really like this because anytime you're tasked for change or to do something new, it goes into your identity of who you are. And if it doesn't fit, you're going to ignore it and not even bother. If it passes that gate of yeah, I could see that, that's a deep subconscious process. It goes into a subconscious process, which is your brain will try and figure out how to make that work, start putting together different connections like that. We start to get to innovation. And then it goes into your cognitive system where you actually want to try and grab new things. And that creates new behaviors. Why do I mention this? Because we're an art first lab. The first summer, so a year after I started that summer, we invested in 10 murals across the region. And people are like, why is this guy putting tens of thousands of dollars into murals that were created with youth on schools and across the community? And the reason is because art changes minds. Graffiti art and muralists in communities around the world actually predict the future by 5 years. I'm not going to talk about that today, but just take my word and suspend disbelief for a while. But what we do know for sure is that art changes the biology of your brain. When you see something, when art inspires you, you're going to start changing yourself, which makes you more open to learning something new, to change, to transforming, which are ingredients for innovation and change in our public spaces. This idea of then story, how do we then tell that story? So we'll say Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces. How does that story, that journey of transformation transpire? How do people then see themselves? That affects that kind of subconscious aspect. And then how do we cultivate for compassion? How do we understand and how do we enable everyone to be a leader? That's when action happens. And if you follow these principles, change is inevitable, not just for the individual, but for a collection of people, a community. What does that look like? How we, those rules? Art tells us how to do something different and make new connections. These different types of features and what we should do, what we could do with it. And then actually for us, play is the big way to do it. We play. We have a slide in our office. I know not everybody has that. That's one of our magical items. Not everybody gets to use Thor's hammer, but it is a tool that we can use, but you can bring play into anything we do. I'll give you an example. We have youth who we've gone through this process and youth have identified public speaking as a challenge, particularly today, particularly this group that were, late teens that would have been presenting in front of their class in high school and junior high. They don't have the ability or confidence to do that. They're afraid. Combine that with devices, and all of a sudden we have a generation who not only will they not public speak, they will not use the phone. We get some of the most brilliant university students that work with us. They can write emails, they can build rockets, literally build rockets, but you ask them to call someone on the phone and they freak out. So we did a workshop to build public speaking capacity, but we said, let's start with the phone so you can kind of hang up if you freak out. Nobody wanted to make a phone call. So how do we play? Well, we made prank calls. Now that may seem very childish, and it's really hard to do. First of all, you have to turn off the caller ID on your phone. That's job number one. The second is you have to get youth to Google what's a prank call. And you see them kind of laughing and snickering as they're kind of figuring out what a prank call is. And then we demonstrate. So I was the first one. Here's how you do a quick prank call. And what's the first thing that people find? What's the lesson that we can learn from this? Well, number one, people are decent humans. They find that if you call someone, even with something that's ridiculous, like you're trying to order something like, a Chinese food item from a Italian menu, people will spend time to talk to you and like try and understand what you want. And that is a really reassuring thing in these times to understand that people are good. Or you know that someone is just going to cuss you out and that they're not up for it. Either way, the lesson that you learn is number one, people will trust. Number two, you can call and it's okay and it's not nearly as scary as what it is. And that starts to build capacity then to go out into the world and publicly speak, talk on the phone, connect with other humans. So I would invite you to learn from how we have failed at our lab. Um, I can think of someone had asked me, what would you not do again, given all the stuff that we have done that's positive? And I would say the number one thing that I would not do again, but I'm glad that we did it overall, but I don't encourage any other lab in the world to do this unless you're in a very privileged location, which is build digital tools. So we, at the lab, we have built AI tools, blockchain tools, um, GIS tools, and they're good enough that we're now like, that's a revenue generator for our lab. We're a municipal superpower in Waterloo region. We have literally one of the world's best computer science and engineering universities. And I would say if you're trying to build tech tools, please do not. Unless you are in Boston, Moscow, Beijing, uh, Silicon Valley. Here, it is too big of a lift unless you can box it in a small way. It's really, really hard. And it's even more difficult to scale those tools into a bureaucratic system because even though they make sense, they don't make sense. I always say that our director of IT here, he's my municipal hero because every day he shows up with a pineapple to a gunfight, trying to like make sure like it's always like tomorrow that we're going to have our systems hacked or like be held for like ransom. And he would love to adopt all the stuff that we do, but he's dealing with that $1 million problem every day. And that is a challenge. But what we do and see and get benefit from is all of the youth engagement work. Another aspect that I would say is I always like to say it's my job to be both the second smartest person on all the topics in the lab and the biggest idiot. So I can say that the stuff in the lab that we have collectively worked with, and definitely the stuff that have been led by children and youth, that has been the best stuff. The stuff that's just come out of my brain and I kind of like pushed through as the lab manager, that was probably our biggest wastes. And I would encourage anybody who has that role of leadership, if you see kind of on my profile, I always say like a good leader is the janitor. You got to clean up the mess. So from that perspective, don't make messes. That would be kind of the number one rule I would say is like, don't make messes by not working with like people that are more compassionate and smarter than you. And don't hire people that don't meet that criteria. You can see a couple more of these. But I would invite you, if you have not started a lab, come play with us. And this is our offer to everyone in the community. And I would encourage you to build a lab like this, whether you're doing any innovation project, but especially a lab. Give other people the win. We don't need to take credit for it. We're trying to save the world here. It doesn't matter. We just want to see it work. And if you can collaborate with us, if you can come, like a lab is the place you come to fail. Government doesn't really have a lot of flexibility. In large organizations, you don't have a lot of flexibility to fail. And we shouldn't fail in giant ways. We shouldn't build stuff that nobody asked for, that we didn't research. We shouldn't try and like build the future for our youth, as Roosevelt said. We should try and build youth for the future. There is a difference. We should, when we think about like a culture of failing, it is two-sided. Like we need to define our terms. And in this case, it means fail small so that we learn. And the lab is a place where you can experiment, explore, and try new things, and it does not have to work. Not everything has to scale. Not every idea scales outside of a community. Not every idea scales beyond a desktop experiment that's successful. And that's okay. That is okay. But what we know is that government has to transform. And the only way to do that is to provide slack and a place to fail. And if we can do that, and we can structure it because we're going to learn. We're going to win by learning. That's why it's not really failing. It's like Edison. I've just discovered 10,000 ways that don't work. When we do that, and we create a place to do that, a place where then we can road test with children and youth, with the community, where we can build capacity to learn and to innovate, we have the ability to build resilience, to build the capacity to adapt and to move beyond a mindset that is survival based, trying to solve these intractable $1 million problems, to where we can transform a community in half a generation. So that's what I'd like to share with everybody today. You can check out what we've got on our website. You can feel free to email us either through the website, which goes to like a Google email. You can email me directly at gbass@regionofwaterloo.ca, but I'm happy to turn this off and then try and answer some questions if anybody has any. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Grayson. Let me just stop the recording as I